Well, I think India is clearly facing, some near-term challenges. But I think on fiscal and monetary, there's a balancing act here because on one hand, there's clearly sort of a balancing act on the fiscal side. I mean, with the fiscal deficits being where they are, spending sort of freely is not sort of as easy an option if one sort of has to keep credit ratings in mind. But similarly, on the monetary side, I mean, we're having discussion on inflation, well, globally, actually, whether inflation, is creeping higher or not on a sustainable basis, particularly with commodity prices moving there where they are. So I think it's a balancing act. It's a difficult one, but the perspective I'd keep in mind is that a lot of focus, of course, on the extremely tragic events happening through COVID, but this ultimately delays rather than sort of completely turning around the economic recovery. And I think that's really what markets are also beginning to price in to some extent. So I'd keep a balanced perspective, and that's still a relatively constructive outlook from a financial market perspective.
What does the handling, or seen by some in India as the mishandling of this crisis, do to brand Modi, his social license, the reform programme, Manpreet, and ultimately his chances for his third term?
Well, all very important questions, but I think while I'm sure the number of opinions out there, I think the perspective we take is that once again, this is a lesson where financial markets ultimately have a much narrower perspective, and I think that's kind of reflected in what we're seeing as those questions are raised against what we're seeing play out in financial markets. Ultimately, they care about what sort of recovery could we see on a full year basis? What does that 12-month outlook take? And I think while there's a lot of focus on what's been happening over the past month, and indeed may extend for the next couple of months, these sort of, we also have learned from elsewhere that COVID also comes in cycles, in waves. So I think we need to reassess where we are in a few months' time. We need to reassess where we are at the end of the year. And I think especially how the vaccination program plays out on a full year basis, that will be quite important, because regardless of whether it's the questions you discuss, or when you're looking at financial markets, obviously looking out over the next 12 months, I think that full year outlook and what sort of vaccination, and normalization we end up at 6 to 12 months down the line, that'll be quite key. And I think that's part of the reason why markets are still sort of holding up better than what might expect compared to what you see in the headlines.